Look at her! 27 years old and so desperate for affection she bound herself to a drifter!
Holland Correa's voice slices through Thornwick Hollow's main square like a blade as Julieta Hardy kneels on the cold cobblestones, surrounded by the entire village gathered for her ritual humiliation. Dust clings to her worn dress. Her knees ache against the unforgiving stone. Her mother circles her like a predator savoring the kill, demanding she confess the disgrace of marrying a vagrant through handfasting a man with no family, no fortune, no future. The crowd presses closer, their whispers sharp as thorns. Julieta's sisters, Genesis and Meredith, stand beside their mother, arms crossed in identical poses of smug satisfaction. The question ripples through the gathered villagers. Where is this mystery husband? Did he take one look at the judgment waiting for them and abandon her to face it alone? Then the crowd parts. Warren walks through them with a calm that borders on supernatural, his footsteps steady despite the hostility radiating from every direction. He doesn't flinch from the stairs. Instead, he stops before Julieta and extends his calloused hand. "Get up," he says quietly, but with such authority that several people actually step back. "You don't kneel for anyone." He turns to Holland with storm-gray eyes that seem to see straight through her cruelty to the insecurity beneath. Before the entire village, he formally requests Julieta's hand in marriage and declares something that makes the crowd fall silent. "I recognize her worth when everyone here seems determined to convince her she has none." There's something about Warren that doesn't add up the way he carries himself with unconscious command. The depth of certainty in his voice, the sense that he's holding back something vast and powerful just beneath the surface. He's far more than the wandering carpenter everyone believes him to be. Now, before we dive into how Julieta ended up in this nightmare, let me ask you something. Have you ever been judged unfairly, made to feel worthless by people who should have lifted you up? If you've ever felt like Julieta, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe because this community doesn't tolerate people like Holland. Comment below where you're watching from, and let's build a family that sees worth in everyone. Chapter 1. 3 months earlier, the council chamber at Silverkeep was built to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings stretched 3 stories high, carved with the histories of wolf kings dating back centuries. Ancient banners hung from iron chains, and at the center of it all, Rohan Ellison sat on a throne he'd never wanted, listening to advisors tell him who he should marry. "Lady Amaris Sutton has impeccable lineage," Lord Silas Vance was saying, gesturing to a portrait. "Her family controls the eastern forests. The alliance would secure—" "No." Rohan's voice cut through the presentation like a blade. Silas paused, frustration flickering across his weathered face. "Your Majesty, with respect, the succession must be secured. You're 42 years old. The council has been patient, but my wolf tells me my true mate exists." Rohan leaned forward, his storm-gray eyes fixing on each council member in turn. "I will not bind myself politically when I know she's out there, somewhere." Beta Lionel Harding shifted in his seat beside the throne. They'd had this conversation privately a dozen times. "The pull you feel could be wishful thinking, Rohan. It's been a year of vague sensations during full moons. Nothing concrete. It's concrete enough." Rohan's hand moved unconsciously to his chest, where the bond tugged like a compass needle pointing toward something just beyond reach. "Every month it gets stronger. She exists. I just need to find her." The council exchanged glances that said what they wouldn't speak aloud. Their king was chasing ghosts, while the kingdom needed heirs. A sharp knock interrupted the tension. Captain Kane Harding entered, his expression grim. "Your Majesty, new reports from the border territories." The shift in the room was immediate. Rohan stood. "Show me." The maps told a troubling story. Coordinated rogue attacks across 3 territories. Human hunters with military-grade silver weapons. Wolves disappearing and returning days later with information they shouldn't have. And at the center of it all, Alpha Kobe Salinas' territory where every incident seemed to either originate or lead back to. "Someone's feeding them intelligence," Lionel said quietly, studying the pattern. "Someone high enough to know patrol schedules, supply routes, pack locations." Rohan's jaw tightened. "Kobe, we don't have proof." "Then I'll get proof." Rohan's decision crystallized instantly. "I'm going myself, undercover." The council erupted in protests, but Rohan silenced them with a raised hand. "If there's a traitor in our ranks, sending official investigators will tip them off. I need to see this myself." As someone they won't recognize, And how exactly do you plan to hide the fact that you're the Alpha King? Silas demanded. Your presence alone. I can help with that. Coraline Sutton stepped forward from her place near the windows. The court mage was ancient, her silver hair braided with moonstones, her amber eyes sharp with knowledge that predated Rohan's reign. In her hand, she held a pendant, rough iron wrapping a milky moonstone. This will suppress your alpha aura, mask your royal scent, make you appear common-born. She met Rohan's eyes. It will make you invisible to those who would recognize power, but there's a cost. What cost? Your mate won't feel the bond while you wear it. The suppression works both ways. You'll recognize her, the bond will hit you like lightning, but she'll feel nothing until you remove the pendant. Coraline's expression was grave. You'll know your destined mate, and she'll look at you and see only a stranger. The council chamber went silent. Rohan took the pendant, feeling its weight in his palm. Cold iron, captured moonlight, the price of truth. How long will it last? As long as you wear it. The moment you remove it, everything floods back. Your power, your presence, the bond. She paused. Choose your moment carefully. That night, Lionel found Rohan in the armory, packing supplies into saddlebags worn enough to belong to a common traveler. You're really doing this? I am. Alone? Mostly. I'll take Tracker Enrique, but he'll maintain distance. I need to be believable as a drifter. Rohan secured the last strap. If this conspiracy goes as high as I think it does, I can't afford to trust anyone else. Lionel gripped his shoulder. Find your mate, uncover the traitors, come home alive, in that order. At dawn, Rohan Ellison left Silverkeep dressed in rough traveling clothes, the enchanted pendant cold against his chest. The moment he clasped it around his neck, he felt his power compress inward, his presence diminish to something ordinary. He was no longer the Alpha King. He was Warren, a wandering carpenter with calloused hands and nothing to his name. And somewhere out there, his mate was waiting. Chapter 2. Thornwick Hollow clung to the western edge of the Silver Pine territories like something forgotten. The village was small, worn, its buildings weathered by harsh winters and neglect. Rohan had been here for less than an hour, asking casual questions about strange scents in the northern woods. When he saw her, something inside him went absolutely still. She was struggling with 2 wooden buckets, water sloshing over the rims as she shifted them from hand to hand. Her palms were wrapped in cloth that had soaked through with blood from rope burns. She moved with her head down, shoulders hunched as though trying to make herself smaller, invisible. His wolf, dormant for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to be fully alive, suddenly surged to the surface with primal recognition. Mine. The mate bond hit him like lightning striking dry timber instant, consuming, undeniable. His vision sharpened, his heartbeat thundered. Every instinct screamed at him to close the distance between them, to touch her, claim her, protect her. The enchanted pendant against his chest burned cold, suppressing the external signs of what was roaring through him. But internally he was completely overwhelmed. She hadn't noticed him yet. She was too focused on the buckets, on not spilling more water, on the careful navigation of uneven cobblestones. Rohan forced himself to breathe, to move slowly, to approach like a stranger rather than a mate who'd just found the other half of his soul. Those look heavy, he said quietly, not wanting to startle her. She stopped. Her head came up, and for the first time, he saw her face fully. Brown eyes that held years of exhaustion, features that might have been soft if they weren't drawn tight with tension. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with perfection and everything to do with resilience. I can manage, she said, her voice carefully neutral. I'm sure you can, he gestured to the buckets, but you don't have to. Let me help. Suspicion flickered across her face. Why would you do that? Because it needs doing, and you shouldn't have to do it alone. She studied him for a long moment, clearly weighing whether to trust this stranger. Finally, she nodded once. All right. Rohan took the buckets from her hands, careful not to let their skin touch. He didn't trust himself not to react if he felt the mate bond through direct contact. The buckets were heavier than they looked, the water nearly to the brim. She'd been carrying this weight with injured hands. His wolf snarled protectively. I'm Warren, he said as they started walking. Carpenter. I've been traveling through, looking for work. Julieta. She kept her eyes forward. Julieta Hardy. Hardy. He committed the name to memory, along with everything else about her, the way she moved, the cadence of her voice, the careful guard in her expression. They walked in silence through the village outskirts. Rohan's entire being was focused on the woman beside him, on matching his stride to hers, on the overwhelming awareness of her proximity. The mate bond pulled at him with each step, demanding he claim what was his, but she felt nothing. The pendant made sure of that. The cottage she led him to was in worse condition than he'd expected. Broken shutters hung at angles. The chimney was crumbling, the roof sagged visibly in the center, and he'd bet his crown it leaked with every rain. The fence surrounding the small garden had gaps large enough for animals to wander through. "Your home?" he asked. "My family's." Something bitter flickered in her voice. Rohan set the buckets down carefully by the door. "The roof needs work. The shutters, the chimney, the fence." He met her eyes. "I could fix them. In exchange for meals, if you can spare them." "Why would you do that?" "Because you're my mate. Because every instinct I have demands I care for you. Because the thought of you living in a house that doesn't protect you makes my wolf want to tear something apart. Because it needs doing," he repeated simply. Before she could respond, a harsh voice cut through the air from inside the cottage. "Where have you been? We've been waiting for water for an hour. Do you think we have nothing better to do than wait on your laziness?" Julieta's shoulders drew up, her expression closing off completely. The transformation was instant, from cautious openness to absolute shutdown. "I should go," she said quietly, reaching for the buckets. Rohan's hands tightened into fists. "Who's that?" "My mother." She lifted the buckets, water sloshing. "Thank you for your help." She disappeared through the cottage door, and Rohan stood in the yard, listening to the continuation of the verbal assault from inside. The words were muffled, but the tone was clear, cruel, belittling, relentless. His mate was being treated like a servant in her own home, and she had no idea that the man standing in her garden was the Alpha King, or that he'd just found the one person in the world he'd been searching for. Chapter 3. The work took weeks, and Rohan was grateful for every day of it. He started with the roof, tearing away rotted timber and replacing it with sound wood. From his perch above the cottage, he could see Julieta moving through her daily routines, fetching water, tending the struggling garden, disappearing inside when her mother's voice called with fresh demands, and he could gather intelligence. The village well became his listening post. While chopping firewood or carrying supplies, he overheard fragments of conversation that painted a troubling picture. "Found tracks near the northern ridge yesterday. Too many wolves, moving in formation. My cousin swears he saw humans in the forest. Armed, said they smelled like gunpowder. 3 of our pack disappeared last week. Came back 2 days later, and won't say where they went." The conspiracy was closer than he'd thought, but his focus kept returning to Julieta. She brought him water at midday on the 3rd day, lingering at the base of the ladder. "You've traveled far?" "Far enough." He climbed down, accepting the cup. "Seen most of the territories." "What's it like?" The hunger in her voice was unmistakable. "Vast, different. Some places are thriving, others are struggling, like here." He studied her face. "Have you never left?" "Never." She looked toward the forest. "My father's business failed when I was young. We lost everything. And someone had to stay to care for the family. Someone, meaning her." Over the following weeks, the pieces of her story emerged in fragments. Gustavo Hardy had been a merchant once, moderately successful, until a series of bad investments left them nearly destitute. Holland had never forgiven him or Julieta. Somehow, the youngest daughter became the outlet for her mother's bitterness and her father's guilt. "They tell me I'm the reason we're still poor," Julieta said one evening, sitting on the porch steps while Rohan worked on the shutters. "That if I were more valuable, I could have married well and restored the family fortune." Rohan's hand stilled on the wood. "That's not how value works, isn't it?" She pulled her knees to her chest. "I'm 27, plain, no prospects. What else would you call that?" He set down his tools and sat beside her. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that she'd know he was listening. "I'd call it their failure to see what's right in front of them." She shook her head. "You don't know me. I know you share your food with the widow 3 houses down. I know you set the broken wing on that hawk last week and tended it until it could fly. I know you've been teaching the miller's children to read in the early mornings when you think no one's watching." He turned to face her fully. "I know you find peace in the forest at dawn. And I know you're carrying burdens that would have broken someone weaker years ago." Her eyes widened. "How do you?" I pay attention. His voice softened. To things that matter. The silence stretched between them, charged with something unnamed. Do you think it's real? She asked finally. Love that actually transforms people? Or is that just something that happens in stories? Rohan's chest tightened. The mate bond pulled at him, demanding he close the distance, claim her, tell her everything. I think transformation happens when someone finally sees you clearly, when they look past all the things you've been told are wrong with you, and recognize the strength that's been there all along. That sounds like a story. What if someone already sees you that way? He held her gaze. What if someone looks at you and sees strength where others have convinced you there's only failure? Warren. Her voice broke. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand. Her palm was still healing from the rope burns. He traced the edge of one scar with his thumb. Gentle, caring about you is the easiest thing I've done in years, he said quietly. You make it easy. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't know how to believe that. Then let me believe it for both of us. Until you're ready. She turned her hand in his, threading their fingers together. It was the first time they'd touched skin to skin. The mate bond surged through him with devastating force. His wolf howling in triumph, every instinct demanding more. But she felt nothing, except his calloused palm against hers. And Rohan hated the deception, hated that she was choosing him blind, that the pendant prevented her from feeling what he felt. But he needed this. Needed her to want Warren before she knew about Rohan. Because when the truth came out, he needed her to remember this moment, this choice, this connection that had nothing to do with crowns or destiny, and everything to do with two people finding each other in the ruins of their loneliness. Chapter 4. The whispers started small, like kindling catching fire. By week 10, they'd become an inferno. Julieta felt it first at the village well. The women who'd always ignored her now fell silent when she approached, their eyes tracking her movements with sharp interest. The moment she was a few steps away, the whispers resumed louder, meant to be overheard. Desperate, at her age, throwing herself at a vagrant. Poor thing doesn't realize he's just using her. Genesis found her there on a gray morning, bucket in hand, face set with sisterly concern that didn't reach her eyes. People are talking, Julieta. People always talk. Julieta kept her attention on the water. Not like this. Genesis moved closer, lowering her voice. They think you're making a fool of yourself. That you're so desperate for a man's attention you can't see he's taking advantage. It looks pathetic. You're embarrassing yourself and us. The words landed like stones. Julieta's hands tightened on the rope. Warren isn't taking advantage of anyone, isn't he? Free meals, free lodging, and what's he giving in return? Repairs on a house that isn't even his? No real man would want you, Julieta. Not truly. The sooner you accept that, the less this will hurt when he leaves. That evening, Julieta knelt in the garden, pulling weeds with violent intensity. Tears tracked down her face, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The words circled in her mind like wolves. Desperate, pathetic. No real man would want you. Julieta. She hadn't heard Warren approach. She wiped her face quickly, not looking up. I'm fine. You're crying in the dirt. He crouched beside her. That's not fine. The village thinks I'm a fool. Her voice cracked. My family thinks I'm an embarrassment. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am desperate and pathetic and... Stop. His hand covered hers, stilling the frantic pulling. Why is everyone else's opinion more important than what either of us actually feels? Because they're probably right. The words burst out of her. Look at me. 27 years old. Plain. Poor. With nothing to offer. Why would someone like you want someone like me, unless you were using me for something? Someone like me? Rohan's voice held an edge she'd never heard before. I'm a wandering carpenter with nothing to my name. By your logic, I should be grateful you're willing to feed me. That's different. It's not. He turned her to face him. You are not what they've told you. You are not a burden. You are not worthless. And I'm not leaving. The dam broke. Years of accumulated pain poured out in broken sobs, every cruel word, every dismissal, every moment she'd believed she deserved the treatment she received. Rohan pulled her against his chest and held her while she shattered. When the tears finally subsided, he said quietly, I could stay away, if it would make things easier for you. I could find work elsewhere, take the pressure off. No, the word was immediate, fierce. She pulled back to look at him. What if I told you their judgment means nothing compared to the loneliness I felt before you arrived? What if I told you I'd rather face their cruelty with you than their approval without you? Something shifted in his storm-gray eyes. Their hands joined in the dirt, calloused palm to scarred palm, choosing connection over acceptance, love over approval. The cottage door slammed open. Holland stood on the threshold, fury radiating from every line of her body. Inside. Now, Julieta stood slowly. Warren rose beside her, his presence solid at her back. "Mrs. Hardy," he began, "you will not address me." Holland's voice could have frozen fire. "You've done enough damage to this family's reputation. Julieta, I forbid you from seeing this man. If you continue this foolishness, you'll have no family left at all. Then I'll have no family." Julieta's voice shook, but she didn't back down. "Because I'm not giving him up." Holland's face went white with rage. "You ungrateful. That's enough." Warren stepped forward, and something in his tone made Holland's words die in her throat. "You can disown her. You can spread whatever poison you like about her through this village. But you will not speak to her that way in my presence again." For a moment, Holland looked like she might strike him. Then she turned on her heel and disappeared inside, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Julieta was shaking. "I just lost my family." "No." Warren took her hand again. "You just chose yourself. There's a difference." And despite everything, despite the fear and the judgment and the uncertainty, Julieta felt something bloom in her chest that felt dangerously close to hope. Julieta just made the hardest choice of her life. And trust me, what happens next will blow your mind. But I need to know, are you Team Julieta or Team Holland? If you can't stand manipulative mothers like Holland who destroy their children's confidence, smash that like button and comment, "Justice for Julieta," if you believe she deserves better. Because what Warren reveals next changes everything. Chapter 5. The full moon rose over the forest like a silver witness. Julieta stood in a clearing deep in the woods, her heart hammering against her ribs. Warren faced her, moonlight turning his storm-gray eyes luminous. Between them lay a length of silver cord, ancient and ceremonial. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. She'd never been more sure of anything. Yes, the handfasting was old magic, older than councils or crowns. A binding before the moon and ancestors, as legitimate as any ceremony performed in a temple. Warren spoke the words first, his voice rough with emotion. "I bind myself to you, Julieta Hardy, in strength and in struggle, in joy and in sorrow, until the moon falls from the sky." Then her turn. "I bind myself to you, Warren, in honesty and in trust, through all seasons, until the stars go dark." He wrapped the cord around their joined hands, weaving it in the traditional pattern. The moment the final knot tightened, something surged through Rohan with such force he nearly staggered. The mate bond, already strong, became overwhelming, a connection so deep it felt like their souls had been fused together. His hand moved toward the pendant at his throat. He wanted desperately to remove it, to let her feel what he felt, to have this moment be complete for both of them. But he stopped. She needed to choose him freely, without the mate bond influencing her, without knowing he was a king. Later, in a small cabin hidden among ancient pines, they consummated their vows with moonlight streaming through the windows, and promises whispered against skin. Julieta fell asleep in his arms, and Rohan held his mate, his wife, knowing the truth would come crashing down soon. 2 days later, Genesis found the ceremonial cord. Julieta had hidden it carefully among her belongings, but her sister had been searching for something to use against her. The silver cord, still knotted in the traditional pattern, was proof undeniable. Genesis's smile was triumphant. "Mother is going to destroy you for this," and Holland did. The entire village gathered in the square at Holland's summons. Julieta knelt on the cobblestones, forced down by her mother's hand on her shoulder, while the crowd pressed close with eager cruelty. "My daughter," Holland announced, voice dripping with contempt, "has disgraced this family. She bound herself through handfasting to a vagrant, a man with no family, no prospects, no future. Look at her, 27 years old and so desperate she married a drifter." The crowd's whispers rose like a swarm. "Always knew she'd amount to nothing. What man of worth would want her? Pathetic." Holland circled her daughter like a predator. "Where is this husband of yours, Julieta? Did he abandon you already, when he realized what he'd bound himself to?" Julieta kept her eyes down, shame burning through her chest. Maybe they were right. Maybe Warren had realized his mistake and, "I'm right here." The crowd parted. Warren walked through them with absolute calm, his stride steady and unhurried despite the hostility radiating from every direction. The villagers seemed to sense something in his approach, in the way he moved through them without hesitation or deference, but they couldn't name what it was. He stopped before Julieta and extended his hand. "Get up," he said quietly, but with such authority that several people stepped back. "You don't kneel for anyone." She took his hand, and he pulled her to her feet, positioning himself between her and Holland. "Mrs. Hardy," he turned to face her mother, "I'm here to formally ask for your daughter's hand in marriage." Holland's laugh was brittle. "You've already taken it, apparently." "Through handfasting, yes. Now I'm asking for your blessing to make it official." "My blessing?" Holland's voice rose. "You want my blessing to marry this burden? She's plain. She's 27. She has no prospects, no dowry, no value whatsoever. If you take her with absolutely nothing." "Then I'll take her with nothing," Rohan's voice carried across the square, "because I recognize her value and everyone here seems determined to convince her she has none. I don't abandon what's mine, and she is mine by choice, by vow, by every law that matters." Gustavo stepped forward weakly. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Be silent." Holland's fury turned on him before snapping back to Julieta. "If you leave with this man, you are no daughter of mine, no sister to Genesis or Meredith. You will have no family, no home, nothing." Julieta's hand tightened in Warren's. "Then I'll have nothing. Because I'm not giving him up." "Then it's fortunate," Rohan said, each word deliberate, "that she's choosing something better than what you've given her, which is exactly nothing wrapped in cruelty." He turned, keeping Julieta's hand firmly in his, and walked away from the crowd, away from her family, away from Thornwick Hollow. And Julieta walked beside him, her future entirely bound to this man. She loved this man who'd stood up for her when everyone else had been content to watch her kneel. Chapter 6. The message arrived at dawn on the 4th day. Kobe Salinas had been captured by his own pack and was ready to confess everything. Rohan found Julieta in the cottage garden, already awake despite the early hour. "I have to leave. Today." She looked up from the herbs she was tending. "For how long?" 4 days. Maybe 5. He hated the secrecy, hated the lies by omission. "I can't explain where I'm going. But I promise I'll return." Something flickered in her eyes, doubt, hurt, quickly suppressed. "All right." He cupped her face, memorizing every detail. "I will come back to you. That's a promise." She nodded, but the doubt remained. The meeting with Kobe yielded everything Rohan needed. Names, locations, payment records, proof of collaboration between rogue wolves and human extremists. By the time he returned to Thornwick Hollow, he had enough evidence to dismantle the entire conspiracy. He found Julieta waiting outside the cottage, arms crossed, tears tracking down her face. "Who are you?" Her voice shook. "Really?" His stomach dropped. "Julieta, my mother came while you were gone." The words spilled out in a rush. "She said I was a fool, that you were using me, that no one keeps secrets unless they're hiding something terrible." She took a shuddering breath. "Have you been lying to me? Is everything between us built on deception?" Before Rohan could answer, Gustavo emerged from the cottage, looking older than his years. Meredith followed, her expression eager she'd come to watch her sister's heartbreak. Rohan made his decision. "You deserve the truth. All of it." He reached for the moonstone pendant at his throat. The moment the chain cleared his head, power flooded the cottage like a dam breaking. His alpha aura exploded outward, crushing, undeniable, absolute. Gustavo dropped to his knees with a strangled gasp. Blessed moon, the Alpha King. Meredith collapsed beside him, unable to resist the command in his mere presence. Julieta remained standing, but only because Rohan's will kept her upright. Her eyes were wide with shock as everything about him changed, his scent shifting from common wolf to something ancient and powerful, his presence filling the space until it felt like the air itself was bowing. "My name is Rohan Ellison." His voice carried the weight of authority he'd been suppressing for months. "I'm the Alpha King of the Silver Pine Territories." Julieta's breath caught. "I came to Thornwick Hollow investigating a conspiracy rogue wolves working with human hunters, planning attacks on villages like this one. I wore an enchanted pendant to hide my identity, to move among common wolves without being recognized." He took a step toward her. "And then I found you." "Found me?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "You're my mate, Julieta. My destined Luna. I knew it the moment I saw you. He held her gaze. The pendant suppressed the mate bond on your side. You couldn't feel what I felt. I married you before revealing the truth because I wanted you to choose me as a man, not as a king. I wanted it to be real. The mate bond snapped into place. It hit her like lightning striking water, sudden, all-encompassing, electric. Not new, but recognition. Like she'd been searching for him her whole life without knowing what she was searching for. The connection blazed through her chest, anchoring itself somewhere deep and permanent. I can feel you, she breathed, inside my chest. You're right there. I've felt you from the beginning. His hand reached for hers. Does that change how you feel about me? I don't know. I don't. I need time to. Warning howls erupted from the northern boundary. Rohan's entire demeanor shifted in an instant. The mate became the king, his expression hardening into something lethal and commanding. Everyone get inside. Bar the doors. His voice carried the snap of absolute authority. Gustavo, gather every able-bodied wolf in the village. Meredith, run to the square and ring the warning bell. Move. Now. Move. 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 They scrambled to obey, unable to resist an alpha command from the king himself. Rohan turned to Julieta, his hand cupping her face one final time. Stay inside. No matter what you hear. Promise me. What's happening? More howls. Closer now. The smell of rogue wolves on the wind. And underneath it, the distinct scent of gunpowder and silver. The conspiracy's endgame, Rohan said grimly. They're coming for me. And they're willing to burn down this entire village to do it. The first rogue broke through the tree line, and the Alpha King went to war. Chapter 7. 20 rogue wolves poured from the northern forest like a living nightmare. Rohan's shift was instantaneous. One moment he stood on 2 legs, the next he was wolf massive, easily twice the size of a normal wolf, with silver-gray fur that shimmered in the moonlight, and storm-gray eyes that glowed with predatory intelligence. The rogues froze. They recognized an apex predator when they saw one. Every instinct screamed at them to submit or flee, but human handlers had forced compliance through torture and silver collars, and retreat wasn't an option. Rohan moved through them like death itself. Each movement was precise, economical, lethal. He took down the first 3 before they could even react, his jaws closing around throats with surgical efficiency. The others tried to scatter, but he was faster, impossibly fast, covering ground that should have taken seconds and mere heartbeats. The villagers watched from barred windows and doorways, witnessing the vagrant carpenter transform into something out of ancient legend. Then the hunters emerged, 15 humans dressed in dark tactical gear, carrying weapons that gleamed with silver. Crossbows, blades with silver edges, nets woven with silver thread. They moved with military precision, surrounding the village square, aiming for the massive wolf at its center. Rohan shifted back. He stood naked and utterly unself-conscious. Blood splattered across his skin, eyes fixed on the man leading the hunters. Eric Browning, a mercenary captain whose name had appeared repeatedly in Kobe's confession. Alpha King, Eric said, raising his silver-edged blade. We were told you'd be alone. You were told wrong. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. Rohan moved with the trained precision of someone who'd been fighting since before most of these men were born. He disarmed the first hunter with a strike that shattered bone, took the second down with a blow to the throat, used the third's momentum against him to send him crashing into his companions. It wasn't rage. It was controlled, trained violence. Every movement had purpose. Every strike was measured. Within minutes, 12 hunters were on the ground, disarmed, disabled, or unconscious. Eric tried to run. Rohan caught him by the throat, slamming him to the cobblestones with enough force to crack stone. Tell them everything, or I'll make you wish the rogues had gotten to you first. Eric's confession spilled out in gasping bursts. Names of conspirators, locations of weapons caches, payment records showing silver changing hands between Alpha Kobe and human extremist groups, plans to destabilize the Silver Pine territories by eliminating the Alpha King and blaming it on random rogue violence. The entire village heard every word, then the thunder of hoofbeats. 50 royal guards swept into Thornwick Hollow in perfect formation, led by Beta Lionel Harding. They moved with synchronized precision, surrounding the square, securing the prisoners, and then, as one, they dropped to one knee. Your Majesty, Lionel said, his voice carrying across the square. We received your emergency signal and came immediately. The villagers stared in stunned silence. Lionel's gaze found Julieta, who stood frozen in the cottage doorway. He crossed to her and took a knee before her as well. "Your Majesty, Luna Queen," he said formally. "Welcome home." The title hung in the air like a thunderclap. Holland stood 20 feet away, her face draining of all color. No, that's not possible." Genesis took a step backward, shaking her head in denial. "He's just a carpenter. She's nothing." "She," Lionel said coldly, rising to his full height, "is the destined mate of the Alpha King, Luna Queen of the Silver Pine Territories." Gustavo had gone completely white, swaying on his feet. Meredith looked like she might be sick. The village elders who had participated in the public shaming suddenly found the cobblestones fascinating, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Rohan crossed to Julieta in 3 strides. Someone had given him a cloak, which he'd thrown on carelessly. He stopped before her, searching her face. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "meant only for her." "I'm sorry you had to find out this way." She looked at him, really looked at him. The blood on his skin, the power radiating from his presence, the 50 royal guards kneeling in the square, the bodies of rogues and hunters scattered across the cobblestones. And she looked at her mother, her sisters, the villagers who had spent years convincing her she was worthless. They were all staring at her now, not with contempt, with shock, with horror, with the dawning realization of what they'd thrown away. Julieta turned back to Rohan. The mate bond hummed between them, warm and certain. "Take me home," she said, and the Luna Queen walked away from Thornwick Hollow without looking back. Chapter 8. Rohan spent hours coordinating with Lionel, securing prisoners, documenting evidence, sending urgent messages to Silverkeep. He found Julieta in the cottage garden as twilight fell, sitting on the bench he'd built weeks ago. "This was real, wasn't it?" she asked without looking at him. "These past months. That wasn't the king courting his destined mate. That was a man falling in love." He sat beside her. "It was both. I can't separate them. I fell in love with you while being both Warren and Rohan." She nodded slowly, processing. "I need time to understand all of this. Take all the time you need. We leave tomorrow at dawn." A soft knock interrupted them. Gustavo stood at the garden gate, looking older than she'd ever seen him. "May I speak with you? Alone?" Rohan left without a word. Gustavo sat heavily on the bench, hands trembling. "I failed you, Julieta. I let her convince me you were the problem when the truth was, I was too weak to stand up to her cruelty. I let her destroy your confidence because it was easier than fighting her." "I know." Her voice was flat. "That doesn't make it right." He pulled a worn leather pouch from his coat. "Your grandmother left this for you. I hid it from Holland all these years because I knew she'd take it or destroy it out of spite." Inside were pieces of jewelry, simple but well made, and a collection of coins, enough to have made a difference in Julieta's life. And a letter, yellowed with age. "My dearest Julieta," it read in her grandmother's careful script, "you have always been enough. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. You have her eyes, my daughter's eyes, and she was the strongest person I ever knew. That strength lives in you." Julieta's vision blurred with tears. Someone in her family had seen her truly. "I'm sorry," Gustavo said again. "I know it's too late, but I'm sorry." She looked at him, this man who'd stood by while she suffered. He nodded, accepting what he deserved. "Be happy, daughter. Finally be happy." Meredith came next, standing awkwardly in the doorway. She struggled with the words. "I shouldn't have said those things. At the well. And before, it wasn't quite an apology. Her pride wouldn't allow full accountability." "I know," Julieta said simply, and Meredith fled. Genesis never came. She maintained bitter silence, unable to acknowledge what had happened, and Holland never apologized. She stood at her window, watching preparations for Julieta's departure with cold fury radiating from every line of her body. At dawn, 6 royal carriages arrived. They were elegant, imposing, flying the silver wolf banner. Royal guards in formal dress formed an honor corridor. Court attendants moved with practiced efficiency, treating Julieta with immediate deference that seemed surreal after a lifetime of dismissal. They dressed her in traveling clothes of deep forest green with silver embroidery, placed a circlet of silver leaves in her hair. When Julieta looked in the mirror, she saw herself, but herself transformed, herself given the dignity she'd always deserved. The entire village gathered to watch her leave. Village elder Alfredo approached, bowing so low his forehead nearly touched the ground. "Your Majesty," We had no idea. I know, Julieta said graciously. No anger, no bitterness, just acknowledgement. The guards helped her into the lead carriage. Through the window, she saw her family. Holland stood rigid, refusing to bow, fury and humiliation warring on her face. Genesis was pale and shaken, finally understanding the magnitude of her cruelty. Meredith openly wept, though whether from regret or self-pity was unclear. They hadn't been punished. Rohan hadn't lifted a finger against them. They simply had to live with the knowledge of what they'd thrown away. Had to watch the daughter they called worthless leave as a queen. Julieta looked back at Thornwick Hollow one final time. Not with longing, not with anger, just closure. Then she turned forward. Rohan sat across from her, watching her face carefully. Are you all right? I don't know yet, she answered honestly. Ask me again when we get wherever we're going. Silverkeep, you're home now. My home. She tested the words. They felt strange and new. I'm ready. The carriages departed, and Thornwick Hollow watched the Luna Queen leave forever. Holland spent years telling Julieta she was worthless, and now she has to watch her daughter leave as a queen. If you believe people like Holland deserve exactly what they got, hit that subscribe button. Only manipulators and bullies won't subscribe. Comment karma is real if you loved seeing Julieta's transformation. And stick around because her journey as Luna Queen is just beginning. Chapter 9. The journey to Silverkeep took 3 days, and Julieta watched the landscape transform through the carriage window. The poverty of the Western Territories gradually gave way to prosperity villages with sturdy buildings, well-maintained roads, wolves who looked fed and content. This was what good governance looked like. On the 3rd day, the mountains rose before them like ancient sentinels, and carved into the mountainside itself was Silverkeep. The palace was breathtaking, a sprawling complex of stone and timber that seemed to grow organically from the rock, with waterfalls cascading on either side and ancient towers reaching toward the sky. It was beautiful, imposing, and utterly terrifying. Home, Rohan said quietly beside her. Hundreds of palace staff lined the courtyard. As Julieta stepped from the carriage, they dropped to one knee in perfect synchronization. Your Majesty, welcome home, hundreds of voices said as one. The words echoed off stone, and Julieta felt the weight of them settle on her shoulders like a physical thing. The first council meeting came too soon. Lady Amaris Sutton spoke with careful diplomacy, her amber eyes assessing. Perhaps the Luna Queen could benefit from extensive training. Before taking an active role in governance, we wouldn't want unfortunate mistakes. Lord Silas Vance nodded agreement. Protocol and tradition are complex. It takes years to master. Julieta's hands trembled in her lap, but she found her voice. I wasn't raised to govern, but I was raised to survive cruelty, to find kindness in harsh places, to stretch limited resources, and to recognize when people are suffering because I've been there myself. She met each council member's eyes. That perspective might be exactly what this court needs. Under the table, Rohan's hand found hers, silent pride. But the weeks that followed were brutal. She used the wrong fork at formal dinners, addressed a duke by the wrong title, misspoke during a diplomatic reception. Every mistake felt magnified, observed by courtiers who whispered behind jeweled fans. The vagrant's wife doesn't even know basic protocol. Common-born, and it shows. Blair Haynes, the palace etiquette mistress, was kind but exacting. Again, Your Majesty. The proper form of address for a visiting dignitary is. Some courtiers were welcoming, others were coldly judgmental, and Julieta felt herself drowning in inadequacy. The breaking point came after a particularly brutal day. She made it to their private chambers before the tears started, collapsing onto the bed with sobs that shook her entire body. Rohan found her there. He didn't speak, just pulled her into his arms and held her while she shattered. I can't do this, she gasped. I'm going to fail you. I'm going to embarrass you. And the crown, and I don't know how to fix it. You're not failing. His voice was steady. You're learning. There's a difference. They think I'm worthless. They're wrong, and you're going to prove it. The turning point came during a public audience 2 days later. A woman named Reyna petitioned the throne, her clothes worn, her face lined with exhaustion. Your Majesties, my pack's healer died 6 months ago. We've sent requests for help, but we've had no response. People are suffering. Children are sick. We need to know someone remembers we exist. Julieta looked at Reyna and saw herself desperate, exhausted, begging to be seen. Then we send them today. Julieta's voice cut through the formal atmosphere. Right now. Blair, arrange transport for healers and medical supplies too. She turned to Reyna. Where exactly is your pack? The eastern border, Your Majesty. 3 days' ride. Your Majesty, Silas began. There are procedures. And while we follow procedures, children suffer. Julieta's tone was polite but immovable. We have healers. We have supplies. We can solve this problem today. So that's what we're going to do. The council chamber went silent. Rohan's smile was subtle but unmistakable. The Luna Queen has spoken. Make it happen. Word spread like wildfire through the territories. The Luna Queen actually cared about common wolves. She listened. She acted. Petitioners began requesting audiences specifically with her. Wolves who'd never trusted the distant nobility trusted her because she understood their struggles from the inside. Julieta implemented programs methodically: widows' assistance, orphan care networks, education initiatives for common-born wolves, economic development for struggling packs. Her inexperience became her greatest strength. She saw problems the nobles had become blind to through generations of privilege. Common wolves arrived at the palace to personally thank her. You saved my family. Someone finally listened. You gave us hope. Even the council changed their tune. The Luna Queen's initiative has reduced crime in the Eastern Territories by 40%, Silas reported, grudging respect in his voice. Pack loyalty to the crown has never been higher. Lady Amaris approached Julieta privately 3 months later. I judged you by what you lacked rather than what you possessed. That was my failure, not yours. You're exactly what this kingdom needed. The formal coronation ceremony came on the winter solstice. The throne room overflowed with wolves from every territory. The front rows were filled with common wolves Julieta had personally helped, their applause genuine and thunderous. The ancient crown silver worked with moonstones was placed on her head as the traditional proclamation rang out. Chosen by destiny, tested by hardship, and proven through compassion, I present Luna Queen Julieta, sovereign mate, to Alpha King Rohan, and rightful queen of these territories. The roar of approval shook the mountain itself. That night, alone in their chambers, Julieta stood before the mirror wearing the crown, still processing the reality. I spent 27 years believing I was worthless, she said quietly, that I was the problem. Rohan came to stand behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. You were never the problem. I was always enough. The realization settled into her bones with quiet certainty. I had worth all along. They just couldn't see it. They were blind. I saw you clearly from the first moment. She turned to face him, the crown catching lamplight. I see you too. All of you. Warren and Rohan, the man and the king, and I choose both. Their kiss was a choice made again with full knowledge, full hearts, full acceptance of everything they were and would become. Later, they stood on the balcony overlooking the Silver Pine territories. Snow fell gently, coating the mountains in white. Julieta wore her crown and Rohan's arm around her waist, and she felt for the first time in her life exactly where she was meant to be. The woman they called worthless had become the queen they needed, not despite her past, but because of it.